Fighter pay has long been a contentious issue in mixed martial arts, and no saga brought this to the spotlight more than the UFC's deal with sportswear firm Reebok. Today, we look at one of the most controversial business deals in MMA history, upsetting entire nations and causing some of the sport's biggest stars to leave the promotion, all while looking like a Power Ranger in the process. Welcome to the INC, and this is the story of the failed UFC Reebok deal. Much like the sport at the time, the early days of MMA apparel was a Wild West. Rules were not enforced regarding what a fighter could wear in the cage, with most choosing to don traditional attire associated with their main discipline. By the mid-2000s, however, the gis and boxing gloves of the early years were a thing of the past, giving way to the vale tudo and board shorts commonly associated with the sport today. In an increasingly media-friendly landscape, a fighter's look became an important part of their branding, with Chuck Liddell, Mirko Cro Cop, and BJ Penn some of the fighters known for what they wore in the cage as much as their success in it. As the sport grew in popularity, so did its viability as a marketing front, with fighters leasing space on their shorts for local businesses, with some earning over $100,000 in sponsorship fees on top of their fight purse. Fighters began to look more like walking billboards than credentialed athletes, culminating in 2002 when Rico Rodriguez got a gambling sponsor tattooed on his back for a title match with Randy Couture, a decision that Dana White later claimed nearly led to the closure of the UFC.
The tribe said, we're shutting down the show. They're not having it. It was the main event. So
yeah, I remember that.
Lorenzo and I got in a room with these guys and worked it out with them, but he almost shut down the show. And back in those days, a show getting shut down like that could have put us out of business.
The issues regarding sponsorships soon caught the eye of the UFC. The company had attempted to profit from the trend by introducing a sponsorship tax in 2009. But it wasn't until 5 years later that their assault on the practice began. The UFC's problem was twofold. Several fighter sponsors clashed with those organized by the promotion, thus creating a conflict of interest, while many of the companies promoted by fighters were unfitting for an increasingly mainstream product. The company needed to take extreme action to quell the sponsor bonanza, but the way they did so created one of the company's biggest controversies. In December 2014, the UFC announced the deal with sportswear firm Reebok to become the exclusive supplier of UFC merchandise, with the company introducing their new fight kits the following year. While Reebok had taken recent steps into the sport, most notably with Johnny Hendricks and Ronda Rousey, the company were seen as outsiders to the MMA community, with UFC bosses hoping Reebok's mainstream would gain them a foothold in the sportswear market. The biggest issue, however, came in the financials. As part of the deal, UFC bosses terminated all fighter-arranged sponsorships, instead imposing a new funding model based on merch sales and a stipend based on their number of UFC fights. $2,000 for company newcomers to $40,000 for defending champions. It didn't take long for the deal to garner backlash. In an interview in 2016, heavyweight fighter Brandon Schaub claimed he lost over 90% of his revenue as a result of the Reebok deal, and later cited it as one of the biggest factors in announcing his retirement from the sport. Female fighters were among the hardest done by, as the comparative youth of their divisions meant many were placed on the lowest pay tier by default. Carla Esparza earning just $2,000 from Reebok despite having been a champion a few months earlier. There were some figures which defended the deal. Fighters who failed to secure sponsorship on their own would be guaranteed a stipend through Reebok's pay structure, a benefit for newcomers and international fighters who did not have the profile of their peers. And as Reebok's launch drew ever closer, UFC president Dana White remained insistent the deal would prove a success.
A fighter can go out this Saturday and fight and have a set of sponsors, can go out 2 months later and have a completely different set of sponsors. With Reebok, every time they step in there, they're getting paid, and they get 20% on the back end. Anything that sells with their name on it, they're getting 20% of. You know, is this thing going to be perfect right out of the gate? Oh, it's new. It's going to be a work in progress, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Reebok's fight kits were formally launched in a lavish ceremony in June 2015, and fans were less than impressed with what they saw. The colorful shorts of previous years giving way to monochromed battles of black and white. Featherweight champion Jose Aldo was a particular critic, suggesting the kit's designs made fighters look like the kids' TV series Power Rangers. Not only were the kits uninspired, but they were also lazily put together. While Conor McGregor showcased his flexibility on stage, fans noticed a number of design errors on Reebok's website. Fans of Jermaine Durandame, yes they exist, were forced to go to the men's section of Reebok's website to buy her fight kit, where Durandame sat alongside other stars as Anderson Aldo, Marcio Lyoto Machida, and Kevin Swanson. The most infamous victim was former Strikewear champion Gilbert Melendez, who, thanks to spelling errors on Reebok's website, was rechristened Giblert, a nickname which became synonymous with the champion for the rest of his career. If Reebok weren't upsetting individual fighters, they were upsetting entire nations. As Conor McGregor continued his rise in prominence, Reebok attempted to capitalize by releasing an Irish Pride t-shirt on their website, omitting the 6 countries making up Northern Ireland. In a country as politically contentious as Ireland, the move garnered an immediate backlash, with McGregor's coach John Kavanagh threatening to withdraw his fighters from the promotion if the Ireland T wasn't removed. A lesser controversy involved Polish fighters, with early versions of their kit featuring a black eagle despite the image being offensive due to being a symbol of Soviet oppression. The mistake was quickly amended, but Polish fighters would sport a white eagle for the rest of Reebok's tenure. Bland and offensive in equal measure, Reebok completed the trifecta with the quality of the kits themselves, with several female fighters suffering wardrobe malfunctions in the months after the deal. The most notable example came at Fight Night Vancouver, when a match between Joanne Calderwood and Valerie Letourneau was marred due to Calderwood constantly catching her foot on Letourneau's top. The Reebok's deal was written off as a bust within months of its inception, but it wasn't as if anyone could talk about it. During the company's tenure, the UFC adopted a zero-tolerance approach to staff speaking out against the Reebok deal, as well as anyone who refused to adhere to the company's strict dress policy. Prior to his match with Travis Brown at Fight Night Boston, Matt Mitrione was forced to attend Media Day barefoot due to wearing Air Jordans opposed to Reebok footwear. Mitrione would leave the promotion shortly after, citing Reebok as one of the biggest factors in his decision. The biggest victim, however, was longtime UFC cutman Jacob "Stitch" Duran. During a podcast interview that July, Duran spoke out against the fairness of the Reebok deal, pointing out that while Reebok embarrassed fighters for their loss of sponsorship, they didn't for non-competing staff. Duran was released from his contract shortly after, speaking a huge backlash from several fighters, and leading Dana White to deliver one of his most infamous barbs of all time.
Friends are people you call on the phone, you hang out with, you talk to all the time. Don House, who's one of our cut men, he and I were very close and still are, but Stitch Duran was never my friend.
Reebok would take on board the criticism of their launch over the coming months. For his match with Jose Aldo at UFC 194, Conor McGregor was given permission by the UFC to wear green shorts, sparking a rollout of colored fight kits beginning at UFC 200. The introduction, however, wasn't without flaws, as delays producing fighters' tops left Holly Holm's match with Valentina Shevchenko looking more like a jumble sale than a top-level fight. Ironic, given professionalism was cited as a reason for the Reebok deal in the first place. Reebok introduced brand new versions of the kits in 2017, and while better received, the company failed to address underlying concerns regarding fighter pay. Despite sponsorship revenue doubling in the 6 years of the deal, Reebok failed to adjust its fighter pay accordingly, with annual payouts ranging from $6.2 million in 2019 to a record $7.3 million 2 years earlier. The fighter pay issue gained leverage with some of the company's newer guard, with Sean O'Malley proving a vocal critic and top 10 welterweight Jeff Neal admitting he was still working as a waiter due to not earning enough money to train full-time. Although the backlash had lessened since 2015, the deal had damaged Reebok's standing in the MMA community, and the planned sportswear crossover the UFC banked on failed to pay dividends. By the start of 2021, the company's association with the sport was numbered. MMA's worst-kept secret was revealed that April, when the UFC announced a new merchandising deal with the French firm Venom. cutting short its association with Reebok despite the offer of a 2-year extension. Reebok's final event took place at UFC 260, with Francis Ngannou beating Stipe Miocic to win the company's heavyweight title. Ironically, the result mirrored the start of Reebok's tenure, with the last pay-per-view before the deal seeing a heavyweight title change between Fabricio Werdum and Cain Velasquez. In total, Reebok paid out just under $40 million to fighters over the 6 years of their tenure. A heavy price for a move that arguably damaged the company's standing short-term. The Reebok deal remains one of the UFC's biggest own goals. While its plan to clean the sport's image was done with good intentions, it opened a can of worms regarding their mistreatment of talent, as well as sparking the fighter pay issue which can still be felt to this day. So, the next time you need a new shirt for the gym, stick to Under Armour. This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss a video.